The Still Point, welcome back to the Worthington Chronicles. If you love stories of healing hearts and unexpected connections, you're in the right place. Let's begin our next tale. The first thing Layla St. James noticed was the silence. After the constant urgent symphony of the ER, the beeping monitors, the hurried footsteps, the low murmur of worried families, the private wing of the hospital felt unnervingly still. It was exactly why she had taken this temporary assignment. A chance to breathe, to care for one patient without the looming threat of chaos. The second thing she noticed, as she pushed open the door to Suite 304, was that the room's occupant seemed determined to shatter that silence. Owen Peters was a storm confined to a hospital bed. His dark hair was messy, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. One leg was elevated, encased in a formidable brace, but the rest of him was in motion. He held a phone to his ear, his voice a sharp, commanding thing that seemed too large for the sterile space. "No, the projections are insufficient. I want the full data set on my desk in 1 hour, or find me someone who can actually do their job." He ended the call without a goodbye, and immediately his piercing blue eyes, sharp with intelligence and frustration, locked onto her. "You're not Dr. Evans," he stated, his gaze sweeping over her scrubs. "Layla St. James. I'm your nurse," she said, her voice calm and measured, a practiced tone she used with agitated patience. She moved to the foot of his bed, picking up his chart. "Tibial plateau fracture post-surgical day 2. How is your pain on a scale of manageable?" He cut her off, his jaw tight. "What I need is a stronger Wi-Fi signal and my laptop charger." "This room is a dead zone." Layla didn't flinch. She placed the chart back in its slot. "Your priority is rest, Mr. Peters, not your stock portfolio." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "You have no idea what my priorities are, and it's Owen." Before she could respond, the door opened and Dr. Evans walked in, his expression stern. "Owen, I see you've met Nurse St. James." He glanced at the phone in Owen's hand. "I hope that wasn't work." Owen's smile was all sharp edges. "Just coordinating?" My convalescence, Dr. Evans was not amused. He turned to Layla, but spoke loudly enough for Owen to hear every word. "The surgery to repair his tibia was a success, but it's fragile. The bone needs absolute rest to heal. If he puts weight on that leg prematurely, or stresses his body, he risks a permanent disability. No walking, no crutches for at least another week. His only job is to be still." The word "still" seemed to hang in the air, a life sentence for a man like Owen. Layla watched as his hands clenched on the sheets, the knuckles white. He looked like a caged eagle, proud and utterly trapped. "Understood, doctor," Layla said softly. "As the..." Dr. Evans left, Owen turned his stormy gaze back to her. "So, you're my warden." Layla met his eyes, her own steady. "I'm your nurse. My job is to help you heal." "Then get me out of here," he said, the command laced with a desperate edge she recognized all too well. It was the sound of a man who was terrified of being left alone with his own thoughts. She simply picked up the blood pressure cuff. "Let's start with your vitals." As she wrapped the cuff around his arm, she could feel the restless energy radiating from him. This was not going to be a simple assignment. The broken bone was the least of what needed mending in this room. The days settled into a tense rhythm. Owen was a demanding patient, constantly testing boundaries. He'd accidentally drop his phone just out of reach or ask for water the moment Layla sat down to chart. She met every request with unshakable patience, her calm a quiet counterpoint to his storm. One night, Layla was doing a final round before her shift ended. The hallway was dark and silent. As she passed Owen's door, she heard it, a strangled gasp, followed by a low, desperate cry. She pushed the door open quietly. Owen was asleep but trapped in a nightmare. His body was rigid, sweat beading on his forehead. Please don't go," he choked out, the words raw and utterly vulnerable. This wasn't the commanding billionaire. This was a terrified boy. Layla's professional detachment wavered. She didn't turn on the light. She moved to the bedside and placed a gentle hand on his arm, careful to avoid his injured leg. "Owen," she said softly, "you're safe. You're in the hospital." It's just a dream. He jerked awake, his eyes wild and unfocused for a moment before landing on her. He flinched away from her touch, the vulnerability instantly replaced by a defensive scowl. "What are you doing in here?" "You were having a nightmare," she said, her voice still quiet. "I was just checking on you." "I'm fine," he bit out, turning his face toward the window away from her. "You can go." But Layla didn't move immediately. She stood there in the dim light, watching the rigid line of his back. She had seen a crack in his armor, a glimpse of the pain that fueled his restless energy, and she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that his physical healing was only the beginning. The real challenge for both of them was yet to come. The morning after the nightmare, a shift occurred. The air in the room was different, charged with a new, unspoken understanding. Owen was quieter, his usual barrage of demands replaced by a contemplative silence. He watched Layla as she moved around the room, his sharp eyes missing nothing. During his physical therapy session, a young, enthusiastic therapist named Mark had him doing simple leg lifts. Owen's face was a mask of strained concentration, his knuckles white as he gripped the bed rails. "Good, Mr. Peters!" "Just 5 more," Mark encouraged. Owen's leg trembled violently, and he let out a sharp, frustrated breath. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Layla said from her chair in the corner. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through his frustration. "The muscle is weak, not broken. It's remembering how to work. Don't fight it. Just breathe and tell it to lift." Owen's eyes snapped to hers, a retort clearly on his lips. But he saw no pity in her gaze, only a steady, unwavering belief. He closed his eyes, took a ragged breath, and focused. His leg, still trembling, lifted an inch higher. Later, as she was preparing his afternoon medication, he spoke, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Last night," he began, not looking at her. "I don't usually—" "You don't have to explain," Layla said gently, handing him the small cup of pills. "The mind processes stress in its own way. It's normal." He swallowed. "The pills," his gaze now fixed on her. "You're different from the other nurses." "How so?" "You don't just see the chart. You see me." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. It was the first real, honest thing he had said to her, and it hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge across the chasm of their roles. The professional boundary they had both clung to was beginning to blur, and neither of them knew what to do about it. The fragile peace was shattered a week later by a phone call. Owen had been making small, hard-won progress, both physically and in the brief, quiet conversations they shared. But when his phone rang, his entire demeanor changed. His face, which had begun to lose some of its permanent tension, went pale and tight. "Yeah," he answered, his voice clipped. He listened for a long moment, his free hand clenching into a fist on the bedsheet. "No, I told you I'm not interested. Handle it." He ended the call and threw the phone onto the bedside table. With a sharp crack, the room felt suddenly cold. Layla, who had been adjusting his IV drip, paused. "Owen?" "Don't," he snapped, his voice like a whip. The vulnerability of the past few days was gone, replaced by a wall of pure ice. "Just don't. I don't need your analysis. I don't need your quiet understanding. I need to be left alone." The words were meant to push her away, and they did. They landed with the sting of his earlier arrogance, but now it felt personal. Layla felt a familiar coldness settle in her own chest, the self-protective instinct she had fought so hard to keep at bay. "Of course," she said, her voice returning to the flat, professional tone she had used on their first day. She finished her task in silence and turned to leave. "Layla," he said, the word rough. She stopped at the door but didn't turn around. He let out a long, weary breath. "Just go." She did, closing the door softly behind her. The brief connection they had forged had been severed, and the silence that returned was heavier and colder than before. The climb toward healing, it seemed, was not a straight path, but a series of painful falls. The silence in the room over the next 2 days was a living, heavy thing. Owen retreated completely, speaking only in monosyllables when necessary. Layla maintained her professional distance, her movements efficient and her expression neutral. The brief bridge of understanding between them had not just collapsed, it had been deliberately burned. On the third morning, Layla was at the nurse's station when a loud, pained cry followed by a sickening thud echoed from Owen's room. Her heart leaped into her throat. She rushed in to find him on the floor, his face contorted in agony, his injured leg bent at an unnatural angle. He had tried to get out of bed on his own. "Don't move," she commanded, her professional training overriding everything else. She hit the call button, her voice steady as she called for a crash cart, and Dr. Evans, all while kneeling beside him, her hands gently stabilizing his leg. Through gritted teeth, he looked up at her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of shame and defiance. I couldn't just lie here." The subsequent scans confirmed their worst fear. He had refractured the tibial plateau. As Dr. Evans explained the severe setback, the damage now threatening his ability to ever walk without a significant limp, Owen's gaze was fixed on the wall, his jaw clenched. When the doctor left, the room was thick with a despair so profound, it was suffocating. Owen finally turned his gaze to Layla, but there was no apology in it. Only a raw, misplaced fury. "This is your fault," he ground out, his voice trembling with rage and pain. If you'd just done your job and left me alone, I wouldn't be in this mess. You're fired. Get out." The words were a physical blow, striking directly at the core of her deepest fear, that she would fail, that her care would somehow cause harm. She didn't argue, she didn't cry. She simply nodded, her face a pale, composed mask. "Very well, Mr. Peters," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I'll inform the charge nurse. A replacement will be assigned." She walked out of the room and then out of the hospital, the weight of his accusation and the sight of his broken body seared into her mind. She had tried to care for the whole person, and in doing so, she had, in his eyes, failed completely. The stillness she had sought in this assignment had been shattered, leaving only a familiar, hollow ache. For 3 days, Layla moved through her small apartment in a fog of quiet defeat. Owen's words echoed in her mind, reinforcing the very insecurities she had hoped to leave behind. She had let her guard down, and it had ended in disaster, just as she'd always feared. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Owen was drowning in a different kind of silence. The new nurses were efficient and impersonal. No one challenged him. No one saw through his anger. The room felt emptier than ever. His best friend Jake arrived on the 4th day, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by stern disappointment. "Heard you managed to break your leg twice and fire the best nurse on the floor," Jake said, dropping into the chair beside the bed. "Quite an achievement." Owen glared at the ceiling. "She pushed. She wouldn't just let me be." "No, she wouldn't," Jake shot back, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Because everyone else lets you be the miserable, self-destructive bastard you're determined to be. She actually gave a damn, and you punished her for it because you're terrified of anyone seeing you're human." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Owen finally looked at his friend, the defensive anger draining away, leaving only a hollowed-out shame. Jake was right. He had pushed Layla away because her compassion had become a mirror, reflecting a vulnerability he couldn't bear to face. The realization was a cold, sobering splash of water. He had been running from the stillness his body needed, but more than that, he had been running from the quiet strength of a woman who offered not pity, but understanding. And in his fear, he had shattered something precious. He knew what he had to do. It wouldn't be a grand public gesture. It would be a quiet, difficult climb, and it started with 3 simple words he needed to say to her. For 3 days, Layla moved through her small apartment in a fog of quiet defeat. Owen's words echoed in her mind, reinforcing the very insecurities she had hoped to leave behind. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Owen was drowning in a different kind of silence. The new nurses were efficient and impersonal. No one challenged him, no one saw through his anger. The room felt emptier than ever. On the 4th day, the door swung open, and his best friend and business partner Jake Taylor strode in. Jake was the only person from Owen's old life who never treated him like a billionaire, just the same reckless kid he'd met in a college dorm. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by stern disappointment. "Heard you managed to break your leg." "Twice and fire the best nurse on the floor," Jake said, dropping into the chair beside the bed. "Quite an achievement." Owen glared at the ceiling. "She pushed. She wouldn't just let me be." "No, she wouldn't," Jake shot back, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Because everyone else lets you be the miserable, self-destructive bastard you're determined to be. I've been watching you do this for 20 years. Run from anything that requires you to actually feel something. That woman," he pointed toward the door, "she actually gave a damn. And you punished her for it because you're terrified of anyone seeing the part of you that's still that scared kid whose dad walked out." The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Owen finally looked at his friend, the defensive anger draining away, leaving only a hollowed-out shame. Jake was right. He had pushed Layla away because her compassion had become a mirror, reflecting a vulnerability he couldn't bear to face. The realization was a cold, sobering splash of water. He had been running from the stillness his body needed, but more than that, he had been running from the quiet strength of a woman who offered not pity, but understanding. And in his fear, he had shattered something precious. He knew what he had to do. It wouldn't be a grand public gesture. It would be a quiet, difficult climb, and it started with 3 simple words he needed to say to her. The climb up the single flight of stairs to Layla's apartment was the most arduous journey of Owen's life. Each hop on his crutches sent a jarring pain through his re-injured leg, a constant physical reminder of his failure. He stood before her door, his heart hammering, feeling more exposed than he ever had on any mountain face. He knocked. When Layla opened the door, her face was a mask of surprise and caution. She was in soft jeans and a simple sweater, a world away from her scrubs. "Owen, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be—" "I'm sorry." The 2 words, raw and unadorned, stopped her. She simply looked at him, waiting. "The things I said to you—" "They were unforgivable," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "I was in pain, and I was terrified, and I took it out on the one person who was actually trying to help me. You saw the nightmare. You saw me at my weakest, and instead of thanking you for your kindness, I punished you for it." He took a shaky breath, his knuckles white on the crutch grips. "My whole life, I've been running from my past, from any feeling that made me feel vulnerable. I thought if I just moved fast enough, climbed high enough, I could outrun it all. But you were the still point. The one person who wasn't impressed by the money or the achievements, who just saw a man who was hurting. And I was so terrified of that stillness, of what I might feel if I actually stopped, that I tried to destroy it." He looked directly into her eyes, his own filled with a vulnerability he no longer tried to hide. "Firing you was the biggest mistake I've ever made. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Layla studied his face, seeing the genuine remorse, the shattered pride, the hope warring with the fear. The ice around her own heart began to thaw. She stepped back, holding the door open wider. "You'd better come in before you fall over," she said softly. "And we can talk." The final chapter opens not in a hospital room, but in a sun-drenched meadow 6 months later. Wildflowers dance in a gentle breeze, and the air smells of pine and earth. Owen stands, leaning lightly on a single trekking pole for balance, looking out at a forest path. He is healed, but the experience has left its mark, not just in the slight stiffness in his leg, but in the new patience in his eyes. Layla stands beside him, her hand resting comfortably in his. She no longer wears scrubs, but the same calm, strength radiates from her. "Ready?" she asks, her voice soft. He nods, a genuine, peaceful smile on his face. "Ready." He takes a step, then another, his gait steady and sure. He is walking on his own, not toward a dangerous, lonely summit, but along a gentle path, with her. This was the real journey, not the healing of a bone, but the mending of a spirit. And it was a journey they would continue together, one peaceful step at a time. We hope you enjoyed The Still Point. If this story of healing and second chances touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the Worthington Chronicles for more full-length romance stories. Let us know in the comments what your favorite moment was. Thank you for watching.